Our next presenter this evening is someone that I'm very happy to have the opportunity to introduce because as an association exec, every now and then people say to you, well, what's your idea of an exemplary member of an association? And I think that Tom Amder and I would agree, and Caitlin, that David Abramowitz is really the exemplary member for an association. David is somebody who's always there for us. He comes up with ideas for programming, suggests new activities. In fact, Tom announced earlier today that we've received funding from the MacArthur Foundation to undertake a project to help owners of affordable housing portfolios do energy retrofit on their properties. And that really comes out of a group that we have within NHRA, the Council for Energy Friendly Affordable Housing. Great council, lousy name. That was David's idea several years ago, and now we're really seeing it take hold, and it's been recognized, as I say, with the support from the MacArthur Foundation. Well, David is also probably another individual who doesn't need much of an introduction before this kind of an audience. But in case there is anybody who doesn't know him here, David is the director and co-chair of the real estate group at Gulston & Stores up here in Boston. He's also a member of the Board of Mass Development. He's a vice chairman of our association, of National Housing Rehabilitation Association. The list on his biography goes on and on of all the civic and think tank activities that he's involved in. He's a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. He's actively involved with a number of committees at the American Bar Association. He's been on the board of directors of Youth Build. He's an individual who just gives it all for causes he believes in. It's a pleasure to work with him. Please welcome David Abramowitz.
Thank you, Peter. Actually, my wife just says I have a short attention span, so I have to keep, doing different things. But thank you so much for that warm welcome. This is really a thrill, and I'm here to present to Vince. But I have to just say I'm also in the Jack Manning fan club. I've gotten to know him through our mutual support and admiration of the Youth Build program. He's been an absolutely stalwart person, and from all the things he's busy doing, from talking to President Clinton or holding Ted Kennedy's dog to running a company and providing housing, he's always found time every year for the last decade to come out and support the program and individuals 16 to 24-year-old who everybody else has given up on. So you should know that side of Jack as well. So I'm really thrilled that he was honored tonight. My main task is to introduce Vincent F. O'Donnell. The program says Vincent P. O'Donnell, which is, many people get that wrong. Vice President Biden is actually called Vincent P. O'Donnell to congratulate him. For those who get the, sorry, not everybody was here during the Boston elections. But it's really a wonderful honor for me to be able to do this. I've actually known Vince for about 25 years, which is about the age of our daughters who actually went to high school together and all. So I've seen him as a father as well as in all the public roles we see him in, and he's really terrific in all dimensions. But as I was thinking about this award and what we call it, the Vision Award, my first thought that Vince should get a Lifetime Knowledge Award. Because anybody who's ever worked with him knows that he has this amazing encyclopedic knowledge of every program and policy and rule and regulation and technique that has to do with the preservation of affordable housing. And I can remember many of us would call Vince up, decades ago, and you'd say, something like, Vince, I'm doing a deal, and there was something Barney put in some bill somewhere that has to do with tenants somewhere, can you help? And he'd say, oh yeah, that's in the 93 appropriations, I have the copy here, and you'd get it by the end of the day. And he's just, Vince O'Donnell is the Wikipedia of affordable housing preservation. But then I thought, well, that's only a part of his many, many attributes, and he should get the Lifetime Trust and Integrity Award. Because again, if you've ever been involved in a deal or a project with Vince, you know that in any situation, he is somebody that everybody looks to with trust and integrity and is the person who's the honest broker in a situation. And again, I can remember in various things over the years, in Castle Square and many other situations at times, where you'd think that people on both sides just were not going to be able to come together. And Vince is the person you could call up no matter what side of the deal you were on, and say, look, this is what we want, this is what your clients want, how are we going to get there? And he would always come up with a solution that was fair and reasonable to everybody, and when he would come forward with it, people would rally around that. And for those of you who watched him as CHAPA president, when we were going through the negotiations over Chapter 40T, the preservation law, there were points of that where it could have been a big split between housing advocates and developers and tenant advocates in the affordable housing community, and Vince was the person who, again, found his way through that path over and over to sort of bring a law that I think we're all very proud of in Massachusetts. But in the end, we're giving him the Vision Award, and it's incredibly well-deserved. If you read the bio that Marty Bell wrote after talking to Vince in there, I think you'll be incredibly inspired, because you'll see that from early on, Vince was somebody who looked at the situation of the residents in housing, of the dynamics in the development community, of financing, of the developments in the city of Boston and elsewhere, and he didn't just go like with a workmanlike way to say, how do I get this done? He looked beyond. How is this going to last for the future? How are we going to provide capital so that these housing units that we're preserving are going to be there in good shape for the future? What's going to happen when this expires? Whether I'm going to be around or not, whether it expires in 20 years or 50 years or 100 years. And Vince, at every point in his career, has always brought that vision to everything he does. So it is very well deserved that we've named this award, the Vision Award, to somebody who has that great vision. And he's pretending to retire. We don't think that's really going to happen. I think there's going to be an announcement probably in the next few months that he's filling in for somebody else who's taking a sabbatical or started on a new project, because somebody with the enormous talent, energy, and contributions like Vince, they don't retire. They just contribute in a different way. So Vince, come on up, please, and be recognized for what you've done.
David, thank you so much for that very embarrassing introduction. And Paul, thank you for your earlier remarks. And Jack, I'm just humbled to be on the same program with you. And thank you for your really kind words. And if we do actually have to deal with tax reform, you got the dog act covered, right? Okay. But I know you do a lot more than that, a whole lot more than that. So Jack, you're such a giant, and it's great to be on the same program with you. I'm honored. I can't do this without reading, so I'm sorry. It sort of feels like an NPR This I Believe moment. I listen to that when I'm waking up on Friday mornings or whenever they do it, and I think I really admire these people who can say something so profound and so succinct and without preaching. But you're actually stuck with me, so that's not gonna, I can't do that. But, continuing kind of on, this is a Boston theme, or a Massachusetts theme, I like to think. And I was going to recite a lot of names of people that really kind of, my whole career, I'd like to say, has been sort of an on-the-job training process. And I've been so fortunate and so lucky to have so many mentors. So rather than do the whole list, I thought, well, it's going to take too long. I just want to acknowledge Bob McKay, who was then the head of a very new CHAPA back in the late 60s when I was switching careers into housing without quite knowing where I was going. And Bob was so welcoming. And so much was going to happen in the future, but I'll always respect Bob for being so welcoming, and I think that's kind of a lesson we should be welcoming to new people in this field. That's what he did. And then it goes you can have this list, Peter, for future awardees. I'll give you all the other names of people that I think are greats in this field. But I also have had the privilege to work with a lot of tenant leaders along the way, and I just have been so amazingly lucky to meet these human beings who have taught me so much. It goes all the way back to the late 70s. I worked with Adrian Ducille at Meth Union Manor, and Minnie Clark at Marksdale, and Betty Green at Academy One, and Roy and Marcia Garson at Allen Park, and on, Mary Louise Daly and Luann David at Clarendon Hill, and Debbie Backus and Ann Moy at Castle Square. These are really wonderful human beings, and it's been a privilege to work with them and for them, and take a lot of vision from them. So here we go. I mean, I think our success in this field is really no accident. When you hear what Jack and Paul did, this didn't happen by accident. This happened with a lot of strength and a lot of perseverance and a lot of wisdom. And when Howard got this award a couple years ago, one of the things he did was to kind of review the history of leadership in Massachusetts for housing. And it was an awesome list. It was just a whole tapestry of people working together over many, many decades. And I was just so impressed by that. So now it's my turn. I have to do something. I have to have the audacity. What's my vision? I'm standing here, this is the theme, you have to pretend to be interested in what I say, so I'll do something, but it's really hard. And you know how fortune cookies aren't always really fortune cookies, they could be advice cookies or homily cookies. So this won't necessarily all be vision, it might be some advice creeping in there too, or predictions perhaps. So I think big change is happening in our field. I don't think we actually know what it is yet. I think it's happening out of necessity, it's organic, it's natural. Hopefully it's coming out of some wisdom and maturation of our field. The kind of phrase I like to use for it is, I call it convergence. We've had a lot of distinctions, I think now artificial distinctions in our field. And what we're talking about now is that even though we don't fully understand where this is going, when Sandy Enriquez was here for her award, she talked about erasing the differences between public housing and private assisted housing. I think we're on our way there, but we don't know quite where it's happening. Margaret will help us do it. So I'm counting on you, Margaret. And housing is no longer just housing bricks and mortar. It's really related to other community development efforts. And Lord knows Paul did so much to create that in the work that LISC does. And we're learning more and more about how to do that. For-profits and nonprofits are learning from each other. And I think all of us are learning that the problems are best understood in shades of gray or maybe technicolor, but not black and white. And so I think that we have a different way of looking at things. An example, in the nonprofit world, we have an initiative called Strength Matters. I mean, the simple way to say, what is that? It means don't apologize for having a strong balance sheet. And I think we really are doing some real integration of the different kinds of activities we do to merge housing with other community development activities. But that really means we have to get out of our comfort zone. And in order to get out of our comfort zone, that's just very genuinely difficult. But I think that's a responsibility that comes with success. You know, nobody's here who doesn't have some success in this field, so I think it's our turn to try to do something that's not easy. And just a simple example of that is here in Massachusetts, the New Lease program, where property owners and managers are now finding a very creative way to make room for formerly homeless people in a way that sort of takes that huge housing resource that we have and makes it available to other people. It's a truly creative idea, and it was tough to do. So that's one thing that I think we need to celebrate. Also, I think real change does come from pushing the envelope. So I mentioned Adrienne Ducille. Sometimes you don't know why the envelope is there. The Meth Union tenants in the late 70s, they knew what they needed when they were facing displacement through a foreclosure. But they didn't know why they couldn't have it. They didn't know the rules. So they went to Ed Brooke, and they ended up driving a fundamental change in federal housing law that still is with us today in terms of HUD's responsibilities in dealing with distressed properties. That's a great thing. They didn't know why they shouldn't be able to have that. They just pushed for what they needed. We're now trying to incorporate other things like public health in community development, addressing physical and mental health needs of the residents and early childhood development. And this is very difficult, and we are getting out of our comfort zone in doing that, which I think is a great thing. Now, the second point I want to make is I personally I want to campaign to eliminate the word project from talking about what we create here. It's my subliminal thing is I never write the word. I always say property, and I use it in my language. I mean, let's respect the people who live there. We used to, including myself, we used to sometimes talk deliberately and proudly about the tenants and in a way that was sort of a little bit edgy to emphasize the dialectic between the owner and the tenant. And then we all got nice and we started talking about the residents. Of course, the planners talk about households, but they're people, they're families, they're children. And that's really who we do this for. And George Latimer, who is a founding member of POA's board, and who just recently retired from a lot of things, and also a former beloved mayor of St. Paul, always said that in our meetings. Basically, this is about the families and the children that we serve. The goal is to help people help themselves. Basically, the goal is that wealth creation by the families that we serve. So, and then I think there's a bigger issue, and I mean, Jack and Paul talked about some of the politics. Watch your language. You know, I guess I have to say thanks, Mom, for the advice. How do you have a conversation with people who think there's a moral hazard, or maybe it's immoral, to assist needy people? So we've worked hard. We've changed our language to show, you know, we're not going to eat your children. We're not going to hurt your women folk. You know, we have a lot in common with you. All that's true, but we should not obscure the fact that there are real material differences in our values, and that we have to find a way to express those values, but also to work with people who don't see things the way we do. And that's not easy. That's a constant struggle and learning process for us, how to do that. Another important thing, I think, is look around. We are growing new leadership. I remember when I was the new kid on the block, and I didn't know anything. But fortunately, some people were nice to me. But it's been a privilege to share this experience and watch new folks take up the leadership roles. And, you know, CHAPA right now is actively promoting this with their young professionals group, and I think it's a fantastic thing, and I urge everybody who is in a position to do that to help support that and encourage their young employees to participate. And then I think finally, times are hard. We have to really learn how to demonstrate the actual results of what we do. We have to know the facts, we have to face the facts, we have to make fact-based decisions. The people who don't agree with us demand this, and we should expect it of ourselves. We've often relied on claims that we think are self-evident, and that's not good enough. We have to be able to be fact-based and demonstrate that. So, affordable housing, I think, is never going to actually be the factor that determines the outcome of an election. And yet we have a huge influence. You heard stories tonight about this. Enormous influence. And our stakeholders have passion, and they have a huge depth. Geographically, all parts of the country, all walks of life. We're really privileged to have that depth. And David, you were talking about 40T. I mean, that's how we got there. I mean, we had a lot of shared interests from a lot of different people who had many different needs. And that's a great example. A couple years ago, we also preserved our anti-snob zoning legislation, 40B, in Massachusetts, through that same kind of coalition. And this year, we just had, again, this is all Massachusetts speak, but we just, tomorrow, the governor is going to sign the biggest housing bond bill in history. And we got that done together. So this is all really a tribute to all of us. So I guess I'm repeating myself. I think the general theme is here. Many of us have and should hold on to a passionate belief in justice, and we should insist and work on progress. But to do that, we don't have to have this dysfunctional, crazy, kind of crude politics of confrontation. I was at the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington, and I had a little time on the Mall to reflect because it took 3 hours to get through the metal detectors that weren't there the first time around. I had a lot of time, quality time with myself. And so I was thinking, so, you know, what have we gotten done? And I'm not going to go through all that. But one of the things that struck me, and as partly just being with myself and partly listening to some of the speakers, is that we had an amazing combination of basically passionate determination and disciplined restraint. Really, we could have gone all the way this way, we could have gone all the way the other way. And that dynamic between this passion and discipline was emblematic of the kind of leadership that we had in the civil rights movement. Well, I think the housing movement will need that same thing going forward, and that's my invitation to all of you. Thank you.